What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB Sunday, July 25th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon.
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top DFS picks for today's MLB slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have an 11 game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the pitcher position. I like Yu Darvish with a 9% pitching advantage over a low salary batting team, the Miami Marlins. Yu Darvish pitches his best ball versus righty batters, only giving up a .595 OPS versus righties, and he's facing 6 righties here tonight. On top of that, the Marlins have only hit 7 of his last 47 pitches. That's a 149 batting average. He's 10,300 FanDuel salary and 200 more on DraftKings. Projected at 36.4 fantasy points here tonight. He has an ERA of 3.09. His record is 7-4 on the season, pitching an average of 92 pitches per game, averaging 36 fantasy points per game. He scored 20, -3, and 30 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So this is a great matchup. The splits are good. I think this is a bounce back game. So I like Yu Darvish here versus the Miami Marlins. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher first base position. I like Salvador Perez with a 48% batting advantage over Tarik Skubal. Salvador Perez is batting 12% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .986 OPS versus lefties. And Tarik Skubal, he pitches 36% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .827 OPS versus righties. Salvador Perez is 4 for 9, batting a .444 batting average and a 1.666 OPS versus Skubal. He's 3,100 FanDuel salary, and he's 2,200 more on DraftKings. Projected at 14.3 fantasy points here tonight. He's averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 32, 6, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Salvador Perez here versus Tarik Skubal. Oh, I also like that pick because Vegas thinks there's going to be 10 runs scored in this game. So that's their over-under. They think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I also like Eric Haas with a 61% batting advantage over a low-salary pitcher, Daniel Lynch. Eric Haas, he's batting 53% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.106 OPS versus lefties. And Daniel Lynch, he's giving up a 1.303 OPS versus righties. Eric Haas is 2,800 FanDuel salary. He's 1,700 more on DraftKings. Projected at 9.3 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 9, 3, and 26 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 10 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Eric Haas here versus Daniel Lynch. Okay, let's take a look at the second base position. I like Jonathan Schoop. I don't know if it's Shoop or Scoop. I like to say Jonathan Schoop with an 18% batting advantage over that same low salary pitcher, Daniel Lynch. Jonathan Schoop, he's batting 10% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .851 OPS versus lefties. And we know Daniel Lynch, is giving up a 1.303 OPS versus righties. Now, Jonathan Schoop is 0 for 2 versus Lynch, and he's $3,500 FanDuel salary, $1,600 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.7 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 13, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 10 runs scored in this game. So I like Jonathan Schoop here versus Daniel Lynch. Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I like J.D. Davis with a 31% batting advantage over Ross Stripling. J.D. Davis is batting 12% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .925 OPS versus righties, and Ross Stripling throws his worst ball versus righty batters, 19% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .939 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Stripling yet, projected at 12.8 fantasy points here tonight. He's averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 6, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like J.D. Davis here versus Ross Stripling. I also like DJ LeMahieu with a 10% batting advantage over Martin Perez. DJ LeMahieu, he's batting a little bit better versus lefties, batting a .862 OPS versus lefties, and Martin Perez, he throws his worst ball versus righty batters, giving up a .818 OPS versus righties. Now, I like this pick because DJ is 6 for 11, batting .545 batting average, and a 1.552 OPS versus Perez. He's $3,200 FanDuel salary, $1,400 more on DraftKings, projected at 12 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 3, and 15 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game, 10.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like DJ LeMahieu here versus Martin Perez.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, who do we have at the shortstop position? I like Xander Bogaerts, batting against a low-salary pitcher, Domingo Germán. Xander Bogaerts is batting a .839 OPS versus righty pitchers, and Domingo Germán, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, giving up a .815 OPS versus righties. And I like this pick because Xander Bogaerts is 6 for 14, batting a .429 batting average and a 1.253 OPS versus Germán. He's $3,700 FanDuel salary, $1,300 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.9 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 7, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game, 10.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Xander Bogaerts here versus Domingo Germán. I also like Joey Wendell with a 51% batting advantage over Tristan McKenzie. Joey Wendell is batting 27% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .838 OPS versus righties. And Tristan McKenzie, he throws his worst ball versus lefty batters. 23% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .783 OPS versus lefties. There's no at-bats versus McKenzie yet, but I like this pick because Joey Wendell is only $2,700 FanDuel salary. He's $1,600 more on DraftKings, projected at 12.3 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 18 and 10 fantasy points in the last 2 games. Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Joey Wendell here versus Tristan McKenzie. Okay, moving on to the outfield position. Here's a stud pick for you. I like Shohei Ohtani with a 44% batting advantage over Bailey Auber. Shohei Ohtani is batting 7% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .855 OPS versus righties. And Bailey Auber, he throws his worst ball versus lefty batters, 37% worse than his pitch to righties, giving up a 1.037 OPS versus lefties. There's no at-bats versus Auber yet, and Shohei Ohtani is $4,400 FanDuel salary. He's $2,000 more on DraftKings, projected at 14.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 14 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 15, 0, and 3 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Shohei Ohtani here versus Bailey Auber. Okay, now there's a handful of value plays here at the outfield position. You got Jarren Duran, Trevor Larnach, Kevin Kramer, and Michael A. Taylor. So out of all those guys, the 2 guys that I like the most, let's start with Kevin Kramer. He's got a 47% batting advantage over Tristan McKenzie. Kevin Kramer, he's batting a .673 OPS versus righties, and Tristan McKenzie is giving up a .783 OPS versus lefties. Kevin Kiermaier is batting 24% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .673 OPS versus righties, and Tristan McKenzie, he throws his worst ball versus lefty batters, 23% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .783 OPS versus lefties. And I like this pick because Kevin Kiermaier is only $2,200 FanDuel salary, and he's $100 less on DraftKings, projected at 11.8 fantasy points here tonight. Now he's only averaging 7 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 3, 9, and 4 fantasy points in the last 3 games. But the splits are good, his salary's low, and Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Kevin Kiermaier here versus Tristan McKenzie. And the other guy, Michael A. Taylor, he has a 29% batting advantage over Tarik Skubal. Michael Taylor is batting a .629 OPS versus lefties, and Tarik Skubal, he pitches 36% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .827 OPS versus righties. Michael Taylor is 2 for 4 with a 1 OPS versus Skubal. He's only $2,200 FanDuel salary, and he's $700 more on DraftKings. Projected at 11.9 fantasy points here tonight. He's averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 6, 0, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games. But I also like this pick because Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 10 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Michael Taylor here versus Tarik Skubal. And then this guy just caught my eye. I wouldn't play him on DraftKings, but he's super low salary on FanDuel. and it looks like this guy's been on a heater. Take a look at Dalton Varsho with a 17% batting advantage over Trevor Williams. Dalton Varsho is batting 27% better versus righty pitchers and batting a .724 OPS versus righties. And Trevor Williams, he's giving up a .880 OPS versus lefties. Now, Dalton Varsho is only $2,100 FanDuel salary. He is $1,700 more on DraftKings, so probably not going to play him on DraftKings, but I love that FanDuel price. He's projected at 9.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 7 fantasy points per game on the season, but this guy's been on absolute fire, scoring 32, 32, and 28 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I think that might make him worth a shot on FanDuel because he's close to min salary over there. So I like Dalton Varsho as a value play on FanDuel here versus Trevor Williams.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.